The space station floated above a calm blue planet, shining with the light of twin suns. From the viewing deck, Rami stood with wide eyes staring at the alien world he had traveled so far to reach. It was his first mission as part of the human exploration fleet. His heart beat fast with excitement, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. He was not here only as a traveler. He was here as a representative of humankind. The mission was simple in words, but heavy in meaning. Humanity had found a new intelligent race, the Zilari. They were tall, proud, and known for their skin that shone in shades of blue. The fleet had arranged this meeting to build trust and share knowledge. Peaceful contact could mean new trade, new technology, and a better future for both sides. Rami was not an officer or a scientist. He was a cultural specialist, someone who studied languages and customs. He had trained for years to prepare for this kind of meeting, but no training could prepare him for the moment he first saw Lura. She entered the hall with calm steps, her tall form moving with grace. Her skin had a light blue glow and her eyes were deep and sharp, filled with intelligence. Around her head was a simple silver band, marking her as an envoy. Rami had read reports about the Zilari, but none of those words matched the sight before him. The hall was filled with humans and Zilari officials speaking in measured tones. Talks about resources, trade routes, and safety protocols floated in the air. But Rami's focus stayed on Lura. She did not speak much at first, but when she did, her voice was strong and smooth. Every word carried weight. Later, after the meeting ended, Rami found himself walking near the docking bay where Lura stood alone. She seemed to be studying a human transport ship, her hands folded behind her back. He knew this was his chance to speak with her directly. He walked forward, steadying his nerves. "Envoy Lura," he began, his voice careful. "I am Rami from the human fleet. It is an honor to meet you." She turned her head, her gaze sharp. "You are in the hall," she said. Her voice was calm but carried an edge. "You listen more than you speak. That is rare among your people." Rami smiled nervously. "I prefer to learn before I talk." Her lips curved slightly, though it was not a full smile. "A useful trait," she said. For a few moments they stood in silence. Rami tried to think of something light, something that would break the wall between them. He remembered her glowing skin, bright and unique, and without thinking carefully, he said the words that would change everything. "You know, you remind me of a blue Smurf." Lura froze. Her eyes widened and her cheeks grew darker in color, as though a blush had spread across her blue skin. She stared at him, shocked. Rami felt his heart drop. He realized too late that she would not understand the joke the way humans did. To him it was playful. To her it might sound like insult. Before he could explain, Lura raised her hand and slapped him across the cheek. The sound echoed in the docking bay. The strike was not brutal, but it was firm enough to leave his face stinging. "You dare mock me?" she said, her voice trembling not with anger alone but with something deeper. "Is this how humans show respect?" Rami held his cheek, stunned. No, wait. I did not mean to insult you. I swear it was meant as a joke, a playful word." But she had already turned away, her steps quick and sharp. Her figure moved into the shadows of the hall, leaving him standing alone. Behind him, 2 human officers had seen the moment. One of them, a tall man named Aaron, shook his head slowly. "Rami," he said, "do you even know what you have done?" Rami sighed, still holding his cheek. "I think I just ruined everything." The officers looked at each other. "The Zilari care deeply about words," Aaron explained. "Names, titles, all carry history for them. You gave her a name without permission. Worse, it sounded like you mocked her appearance. That was no small mistake." Rami's stomach turned. He had trained for years in diplomacy, studied their culture, and yet in one careless moment he had made himself look like a fool. He imagined the report spreading among the Zilari. The human's envoy, the man sent to build bridges, had already caused offense. He walked back to his quarters with heavy steps. His cheek still burned, but his heart burned even more. In his mind he replayed the moment again and again. Her wide eyes, her blush, the sting of her hand. He wondered if there was any way to fix the damage. That night, as the station drifted quietly above the planet, Rami sat near the viewport. Stars stretched endlessly before him. He thought about why he had spoken those words. The truth was simple. He had wanted to make her smile. He had wanted her to see that humans were not only serious diplomats, but also people who could laugh and play. Instead, he had made her see humans as careless. He pressed his forehead against the glass. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself. Tomorrow I will find her. I will explain. I have to. Far away in her own quarters, Lura sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart still raced when she thought of Rami's words. She did not know why they had struck her so deeply. No human had ever spoken to her with such strange boldness. It had embarrassed her, angered her, and yet left her curious. She touched her cheek where the warmth of a blush had once spread. She closed her eyes and let out a slow breath. Humans, she whispered softly. The beginning of their story had been rough, but something inside her told her it was not the end, and so, on that quiet station above a shining blue planet, two lives had already begun to shift toward a path neither of them could have expected. The next day on the station began with a heavy air. Humans and Zilari officials continued their talks, but Rami could feel the silent wall that had formed after the incident. Every time he entered a room, he noticed Lura's absence. She was careful to avoid him, choosing seats on the opposite side of the table or leaving the hall before he could approach. Rami tried to focus on his duties, but his thoughts kept circling back to her. The memory of the slap still burned in his mind. It was not only the sting of her hand, but the look in her eyes. He had not seen only anger there. There had been confusion, embarrassment, and something more that he could not name. He decided he could not let it rest. If he wanted to prove that humans respected the Zilari, he needed to make peace with Lura. More than that, a strange pull inside him wanted to see her again, to hear her voice and explain himself properly. Later that morning, he stood in the quiet library wing of the station, surrounded by glowing data tablets and soft lights. A Zilari guide named Varen stood nearby, watching Rami search through cultural texts. "You look troubled, human," Varen said, his voice calm but sharp. "I made a mistake yesterday," Rami admitted. "I spoke to Envoy Lura in a way that offended her." Varen tilted his head. "That much is clear. Her silence is known already. But why are you searching through our records?" "I need to understand," Rami replied. "If I am to apologize, I want to do it with respect. I must know why my words were wrong in your culture." Varen studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Perhaps there is hope for you after all," he said, and guided Rami to the right texts. For hours, Rami read about the Zilari. He learned that names were sacred to them, tied to family history and honor. Giving someone a name without permission was seen as claiming power over them. He also learned that playful nicknames were almost unknown in their society. Words held weight, and humor about appearance was often viewed as insult. By the time he closed the final tablet, Rami understood why Lura had reacted as she had. Yet he also felt something curious. In the records, he found a few rare stories of Zilari who accepted names from outsiders as symbols of closeness. Such bonds were unusual but powerful. Rami rose from the table with new determination. "I have to speak to her," he said. That evening, he finally found her. She was in the observation dome, standing near the curved glass that revealed the stars. Her tall figure was framed by the glow of distant suns. For a moment, Rami hesitated. Then he took a slow breath and stepped forward. "Lura," he said softly. She turned her head slightly but did not face him fully. "You are bold to speak to me after yesterday." "I know," he said, his voice steady. "I came to apologize. I spoke without thought and I disrespected you." "That was never my intention," her eyes narrowed. "Do you humans always cover mistakes with quick words?" "No," Rami said. "Sometimes we use actions." She raised a brow, finally turning to face him. "And what action do you plan?" Rami placed his hand over his chest, the way Zilari did when giving respect. "I promise from this day I will learn your ways. I will not speak in ignorance again. Yesterday I spoke foolishly, but the truth is, I only wanted to make you smile." Lura's lips parted slightly. For the first time, her eyes softened, though her face remained guarded. She said nothing at first, only studied him with a quiet intensity. "Humans are strange," she finally said. "You offend, then you charm. You speak of smiles as if they carry weight." "They do," Rami said. "At least for us." Silence stretched between them. Then Lura turned back to the stars. "I will not forgive you so easily, but I will watch. If your actions match your words, perhaps there may be understanding." Rami accepted her words with a nod. It was not forgiveness, but it was not rejection either. It was a chance. The next days moved forward with new challenges. Talks between the humans and Zilari grew tense over trade routes and mining rights. Both sides wanted resources from the planet below, and neither wished to give ground. In the middle of it, Rami and Lura were assigned to a small joint task, reviewing maps of safe landing zones. At first, their work was cold and silent. She gave instructions and he followed them. But slowly, small exchanges began. She corrected his pronunciation of Zalari words. He shared small human sayings that made her tilt her head with curiosity. Though her voice remained calm, he sometimes caught the faintest spark in her eyes when he spoke. One day, as they reviewed the maps, Rami pointed to a valley shaped like a curve. "In my world, we would call this place a smile," he said. Lura looked at the valley, then at him. "You still speak of smiles," she said. "Because I still hope to see one," he answered without thinking. For a moment, the air grew still. Her cheeks deepened in color again and she quickly turned back to the maps. "Focus on your task, human," she said sharply, though her voice carried a faint tremor. Rami hid a small smile of his own. He knew her heart was not as cold as she wished it to appear. As the talks between the two peoples continued, whispers spread. Some officials noticed how often the human envoy and the Zalari envoy were seen together. Some worried it might cause trouble. Others saw it as a sign of possible trust. Rami did not know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. He could not stay away from Lura. Every word, every glance, every silence between them only deepened his resolve. And though Lura still carried herself with the pride of her people, somewhere deep inside, she too began to wonder why this human's presence stirred something she could not ignore. Their story had only begun, and already it was pulling them towards something far greater than either of them could imagine. The station hummed with quiet tension as the third week of negotiations began. Humans and Zalari both wanted to claim resources from the world below, yet neither side wished to yield. Meetings stretched long into the hours of the night. Filled with sharp words and stiff gestures, Rami tried to focus on his role. But his attention often strayed to Lura. Though their first encounter had been harsh, their shared tasks in the following days had started to form an unusual bridge between them. She still carried herself with formality, but she no longer avoided him completely. He began to notice her pauses, the way her eyes softened when he spoke with honesty, the way her voice lowered when they were alone. Still, the memory of his careless joke lingered between them. It was a reminder that trust was fragile and could be broken again if he made one wrong move. One afternoon, the council assigned Rami and Lura to a joint survey mission on the planet's surface. They were to map out safe landing paths for future trade convoys. The assignment required both human scanners and Zalari environmental readings, and so the two races agreed to send them as a pair. As their shuttle descended through the thin clouds, Rami looked out at the endless stretches of green valleys and glowing rivers. The planet's beauty filled him with awe. He glanced at Lura, who sat calmly at the console, her eyes scanning the displays. "This world is alive in ways you cannot yet understand," she said without looking at him. "I would like to," Rami replied softly. For a brief moment, her gaze shifted to him, but she quickly returned her eyes to the console. "Then learn. Do not only speak." When the shuttle landed, they stepped out onto soft ground. The air was cool and strange flowers glowed faintly around them. Together they walked across the valley, scanning the terrain. For a while they worked in silence, listening only to the sound of the wind. But as they crossed a ridge, the ground beneath them shook. A sudden tremor split the earth and part of the ridge collapsed. Rami tried to steady himself, but the ground gave way. He tumbled downward, sliding into a dark hollow below. "Rami!" Lura's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. She rushed to the edge, then leapt down with practiced grace. Dust filled the air as rocks settled around them. The hollow had become a trap, its exit blocked by fallen stone. Rami coughed and rubbed his shoulder. "Well," he said, forcing a weak smile, "at least we know this path isn't safe." Lura knelt beside him, scanning his arm. "You are hurt. Only a scrape," he said. "I'll live." She studied him, her expression firm yet softened by concern. "You make light of danger." "That is foolish." "Maybe," Rami said, meeting her gaze. "But sometimes humor is how humans endure fear." Her eyes lingered on him, thoughtful, before she turned to the rocks blocking their way. Together they began searching for a way out. Hours passed as they tried to move stones, but the debris was too heavy. Their comm signal was weak inside the hollow. so rescue was uncertain. With nothing more to do, they sat near the glowing flowers that had sprouted even in the broken earth. The faint light painted their faces in shades of blue and gold. Rami broke the silence. "Lura, I want you to know something. That first day when I spoke without thought, I wasn't mocking you. Where I come from, when we call someone a silly name, it often means we like them. I wanted to show playfulness, not insult." She looked at him quietly, her expression unreadable. "You wish to show closeness?" "Yes," Rami said. "I realize now it was careless. But the truth is I admired you from the moment I saw you." Her lips parted slightly. She turned her gaze away, but not before he saw the faint blush that spread across her cheeks once more. "Your ways are strange," she murmured. "No Zalari would dare speak such words to an envoy so soon." "I am not only an envoy," Rami said gently. "I am also a person, and so are you." For a long moment, silence filled the hollow. Then Lura let out a slow breath. "When you gave me that name, I struck you not only because I was offended. I struck you because I felt something I could not control. It embarrassed me. It confused me." Rami listened carefully, his heart beating faster. "You humans," she continued, her voice softer now. "You walk into our lives with fire in your hearts and words without caution. It unsettles me, yet it also draws me." Rami felt warmth rise in his chest. He leaned back against the stone wall, watching her. Then maybe that slap was the beginning of something neither of us understood. Her eyes met his again, and this time she did not turn away. For a moment, the distance between them felt smaller than ever. The hours passed slowly, but together they kept watch and spoke quietly about their worlds. Rami shared stories of human cities, of children playing games in the streets, of the laughter that filled markets. Lura spoke of Zalari traditions, of the ceremonies that honored their ancestors, of the way her people sang to the stars before voyages. When the rescue team finally arrived, breaking through the stone, they found Rami and Lura sitting side by side among the glowing flowers. The officers were surprised to see how calm they looked, as though the danger had only brought them closer. Back on the station, news of their survival spread quickly. Some human officials were relieved. Others whispered concerns about the bond forming between them. Among the Zalari, too, questions rose about why their envoy spent so much time with the human specialist. But for Rami and Lura, the experience in the hollow had changed something important. The wall between them was no longer as strong. There was still distance, still pride and culture, but there was also understanding. Late that night, Rami stood once more at the viewport, staring out at the stars. He touched his cheek, remembering the sting of her hand, then smiled faintly. Somewhere on the other side of the station, Lura sat in her quarters, remembering his words. Her hand brushed her own cheek, recalling the warmth of a blush she had tried to hide. Neither spoke of it to others, but both knew their paths were no longer separate. The slap had started their story, but what followed was becoming far more than either expected. The days after the accident in the hollow changed the way Rami and Lura looked at each other. Their bond, though still unspoken, was clear to anyone who observed them closely. They spoke with more ease, worked side by side without tension, and even shared brief moments of quiet laughter when no one else was listening. Yet the growing connection did not escape the attention of their leaders. The Human Council saw Rami's closeness to Lura as both a blessing and a risk. Some argued that it could soften the Zalari, showing them that humans were trustworthy. Others worried it could make humans appear weak, as if their envoy could be swayed by personal feelings. The Zalari leaders felt the same unease. Lura was respected among her people, and her reputation carried great weight. If she grew too close to a human, some might question her judgment. The tension grew sharper when a crisis struck. A valuable mineral had been discovered in the northern mountains of the planet below. Both sides claimed rights to mine it, and the talks on the station nearly collapsed. Arguments filled the halls, and for the first time since contact began, the threat of violence entered whispered conversations. Rami found himself caught in the middle. He wanted peace, but he could see how greed was steering both peoples toward conflict. One evening, he met with Lura in a quiet chamber lit by dim lanterns. She stood near the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes shadowed with worry. "My council prepares for war," she said in a low voice. "They speak of human arrogance, of broken promises. I try to guide them toward patience, but their ears are closed." Rami felt his chest tighten. It is the same with my people. Some speak of strength, of showing the Zilari we will not be pushed aside. If this continues, the peace we worked for will be lost. Her gaze fell on him, heavy and searching. Then what do we do? Rami took a step closer. We show them another path. We prove that humans and Zilari can trust one another. If they see us working together, maybe they will believe peace is possible. For a long moment, Lura said nothing. Then slowly she gave a small nod. Perhaps, she whispered. The chance came sooner than they expected. A sudden signal came from the planet's surface. A group of Zilari scouts had gone missing near the northern mountains, and a human survey team had also been stranded nearby. The stormy weather and unstable terrain made rescue difficult, but the council agreed to send a joint mission. To Rami's surprise, both sides selected him and Lura to lead the operation together. As their shuttle descended once more, lightning flashed across the sky and winds rattled the hull. Rami looked at Lura, who sat calmly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. She gave him a sideways glance. "I was born ready. The question is, are you?" He smiled faintly. "I'll keep up." When they landed, the storm was fierce and the mountain slopes were slick with rain. Together they pushed forward, following faint signals from the missing teams. Hours passed as they climbed, calling out through comms and scanning the rocks. Finally, deep inside a narrow canyon, they found the stranded group. Both humans and Zilari huddled together, trapped by falling boulders. Injuries were clear and supplies were running low. Relief shone in their eyes when they saw Rami and Lura arrive. Working quickly, the two envoys combined their skills. Rami used human tools to cut through fallen stone while Lura guided with her knowledge of the terrain. At one point, the ground shook again, and another rock slide thundered down the slope. Rami stumbled, but Lura caught his arm, steadying him with surprising strength. "You saved me again," he said, breathing hard. Her eyes held his for a moment. "Do not waste the life I saved," she said firmly, though her voice carried a softer note beneath the words. After hours of effort, they freed the trapped scouts and surveyors, leading them safely back toward the shuttle. Rain poured down, soaking them all, but hope rose as the group saw the path open before them. When they finally lifted off from the mountains, the rescued crew cheered, both human and Zilari alike. For the first time, the two sides had fought against the planet together instead of against each other, and at the heart of it stood Rami and Lura. Back on the station, the councils could not ignore what they had done. Reports spoke of how they had worked side by side, how they had trusted each other fully in the storm. Whispers spread through both fleets. If a human and a Zilari could lead together, perhaps war was not the only answer. That night after the rescue, Rami found Lura in the observation dome again. The storm outside the planet had passed and the stars shone bright through the glass. She stood tall, her silver band glimmering faintly in the light. "You were strong today," she said quietly. "Your people will speak of it, and yours will speak of you," Rami replied. "But what matters is that they saw us together." Her eyes lingered on him, searching. Then slowly her lips curved, not into mockery but into the faintest, almost hidden smile. "Perhaps your strange human ways are not always foolish." Rami felt warmth rise in his chest. He wanted to speak more, to tell her what truly burned in his heart, but the moment was fragile. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you." The two of them stood in silence, watching the stars. They knew the councils would still argue, and greed would still stir whispers of conflict. But after the storm, they also knew something new had begun. Trust had been forged not in words but in struggle, and between Rami and Lura, the bond that started with a slap had grown into something far stronger, something that could not be ignored much longer. Peace talks on the station entered their final stage. Weeks of arguments, silences, and near collapses had shaken both humans and Zilari, but the recent rescue mission had softened many hearts. The sight of Rami and Lura leading side by side in the storm had spread through every corner of the station. Stories were told of their courage, their teamwork, and their unshaken trust in one another. Yet the council still sat at long tables, voices sharp as they debated over resources. The mineral-rich mountains tempted both peoples, and greed was not easily silenced. Rami watched these meetings with unease. He could see the danger in every word, the way pride could ignite into anger at any moment. After one particularly tense gathering, Rami left the hall and walked the quiet corridors. He needed air, he needed space, but most of all, he needed to see her. He found Lura in the meditation chamber, a place where Zalari came to clear their minds. She was kneeling on the floor, her hands resting on her knees, her eyes closed. The faint blue glow of her skin seemed brighter in the dim light. He hesitated before speaking. Lura. Her eyes opened, calm but searching. You walk heavily, Rami. Your heart carries weight. He sat beside her, lowering his head. The councils are close to breaking everything. I can feel it. They want victory more than peace. She studied him for a long moment, then said, Peace cannot be built only in council halls. Sometimes it is born in the hearts of people who dare to trust each other. Rami looked at her, his chest tightening. Then maybe it is up to us. Her gaze softened, but she said nothing. The next day, the councils prepared for a final decision. Tension filled the hall as both sides presented their claims. Voices grew louder, hands slammed against tables. At one point, an officer shouted that humans would not be pushed aside. A Seeleri leader fired back with equal force, warning that they would not bow. It was then that Rami rose to his feet. The hall fell into uneasy silence as all eyes turned to him. His heart raced, but he spoke with steady voice. Honored leaders, he began, I know I am not the highest among you. I am not a commander or a council elder. I am only Rami, a cultural envoy. But I have walked the valleys of this planet. I have seen its storms. I have faced danger with Envoy Lura, and I have learned something important. He glanced at Lura, who sat across the table. Her eyes held his, calm and strong. Encouraged, he continued, This world is not meant to be torn apart by greed. It will not belong to humans or Zalari alone. It will belong to those who can respect it. If we fight over it, we will both lose. If we share it, we will both grow. A murmur spread through the hall. Some leaders frowned. Others whispered to each other. Rami pressed on. And if you doubt that humans and Zalari can trust each other, then look at me and Lura. We began as strangers. And worse than strangers, we began with insult and anger. Yet we stand here today not as enemies, not as rivals, but as partners. If we can build trust, why cannot you? The words hung in the air. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lura slowly rose to her feet. My people value strength, she said, her voice clear and steady. But strength is not only in the arm that strikes. True strength is in the heart that chooses patience, in the mind that chooses peace. Rami speaks truth. We have walked through danger together. We have seen that our two races are stronger side by side than against each other. She placed her hand over her chest, a Zalari sign of respect. If my people doubt the humans, then let them doubt me as well. For I, Lura of the Zalari, say that trust is possible, and I will stand by it. Her words fell into the hall like a stone into still water. Ripples spread through the room. Faces softened, anger dimmed, and for the first time in weeks, silence carried hope rather than fear. The councils did not decide everything that day, but the path shifted. They agreed to pause, to rethink, to seek a plan where both sides could share. It was not full peace, but it was the beginning of one. That evening, Rami stood once again in the observation dome. The stars stretched endlessly as if watching quietly. He heard footsteps and turned to see Lura approach. She stopped beside him, her presence calm yet powerful. You spoke boldly today, she said. I only spoke what I felt, he answered. For a moment, neither said more. The stars above shone, the silence gentle. Then Rami, with a nervous smile, said, You know, when I first called you Blue Smurf, I thought I was being clever. It was foolish, I know. But somehow that mistake brought me here, standing beside you now. Her cheeks deepened in color, the faint blush spreading once again. She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, but not in anger. Instead, her lips curved into the smallest, most delicate smile he had ever seen on her face. Do not repeat that name too often, she said, her voice soft. But once, just once more, I will allow it. Rami laughed quietly, his heart light. Then I will treasure that one time. For the first time since their meeting, the distance between them truly vanished. They stood together, watching the stars, not as envoy and envoy, not as human and Zalari, but as two souls who had found something rare in the vastness of space. The councils would continue their work, and the future of two races was still uncertain. But in that moment, Rami and Lura knew they had already built a bridge stronger than any treaty. And perhaps, just perhaps, that bridge would one day carry all of humanity and the Zalari toward peace.